In Ecuador, authorities registered a 6.5 magnitude earthquake in the province of Guayas. There are reports of damage to homes and people trapped. In the United States, anti-war movements rallied to demand an end to armed conflicts and sanctions 20 years after the invasion of Iraq. And Russian President Vladimir Putin arrived in Crimea to take part in the celebrations marking the 9th anniversary of the reunification of the peninsula with Russia. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. This Saturday in Ecuador, authorities registered a 6.5 magnitude earthquake in the province of Guayas, in the country's southwest. According to data from the Geophysical Institute, the quake was registered at 12:12 noon local time. Its epicenter was located just over 29 kilometers from the municipality of Balao at a depth of 46 kilometers. The earthquake was also felt in several localities of the provinces of Pichincha, Azuay, and Loja. For the moment, authorities report one dead in the city of Cuenca, a driver who parts of an old house fell on his vehicle. There are also reports of damaged buildings and infrastructure. And now for more details on Saturday's earthquake in Ecuador, we go with our correspondent Stephanie Bravo from Quito.
A 6.5 earthquake took place today in Ecuador. We are currently reporting from Quito, but the cities that were mainly affected were in the coast and also in other parts of the Andean region. The earthquake took place at around 12:12, and there was another quake that took place at around 12:12 p.m. Local time. The depth was 24 kilometers and 29.26 kilometers from Balao, which is where the earthquake took place. The mostly affected city was Cuenca, which is also in the Andean region of Ecuador. There was a facade of a house that collapsed, and unfortunately one person did die because of this. This is the latest report we have for you so far. We're still waiting to see what the authorities have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Bravo, for the report. We continue in Ecuador. Authorities registered at least 19 dead, 20 injured, and more than 15,000 homeless as a result of floods caused by heavy rains. The National Institute of Meteorology and Hydrology issued a warning due to the heavy rainfall registered in the territory in the last weeks. The provinces of the Ecuadorian coast most affected by the rain system are Guayas and Manabí. Experts from the National Institute of Meteorology and Hydrology said that climate change was affecting the downpours, while the forecast that the rains will continue along the country's coast until April. Peru continues to be on alert due to the predicted rains, especially in the north and center of the South American country. According to the National Center for Disaster Risk Assessment, Prevention and Reduction, 409 districts in the country's northern coast and highlands are at risk from rising rivers and landslides caused by heavy rains. The National Emergency Operations Center has declared a very high level of risk in the regions of Ayacucho, Ica, and Puno, which were hardest hit by the cyclone. President-elect Dina Boluarte told local media that 50 people had died and more than 8,000 had been injured, with 50,000 people affected and more than 1,300 homes destroyed, as well as hundreds of kilometers of roads affected by flooding. The Venezuelan National Anti-Corruption Police requested the prosecutor's office to indict an undetermined number of public officials for possible involvement in acts of administrative corruption and embezzlement of funds. The police entity informed through a public written statement that the request to the prosecutor's office was the result of a deep and thorough month-long investigation on citizens that held posts in the judiciary, the oil industry, and in several municipal governments. The note reiterates the government's will to take the investigation to its last consequences in order to fulfill the sacred duty of confronting the scourge of corruption and punishing in an exemplary manner those who incur in these criminal acts, whoever they may be. Brazilian police confirmed the largest arms seizure in the history of Rio de Janeiro, one of the most populated and important cities in the country. According to the police report, close to 1,000 firearms and thousands of rounds of ammunition were being sold irregularly in two stores located in Baixada Fluminense, a precarious and violence-ridden area where several favelas or shantytowns of Rio de Janeiro are located. The operations that led to this seizure began weeks ago, and those who headed them claimed that the confiscations will weaken criminal organizations such as militias and criminal groups operating in the southeast of the country. In Chile, labor organizations have announced that they will submit a proposal to the executive branch for a wage increase to cover the cost of the basic food basket. The Chilean Workers' Union demands that the government accelerate the increase of the minimum wage, with the argument that the government and the businessmen must assume the increase in the cost of living. A spokesman for the union organization said that permanent negotiations are expected to be held with the government during March and April, hoping to achieve progressive increases that will take the minimum wage to $500 within a year. If the agreements are reached, they will be presented to Congress through a bill. The Ministry of Agriculture and the Agricultural and Cattle Service of Chile stopped exports of poultry meat for the next 28 days after they detected the first case of avian influenza. The spokesman for the Agriculture and Cattle Service, an agency of the Ministry of Agriculture that seeks to protect and improve animal and vegetable health, Carlos Orellana, said that the event is very limited and the situation is expected to be controlled soon. Avian flu has been circulating in American countries since late 2021 through migratory species that crossed the Atlantic from Europe. A local company killed over 40,000 birds to prevent the spreading of the disease in the region. Let's take a very short break, but first remember you can follow us on TikTok at the account at teleSUR English, in which you'll be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and much more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back from the South. In the United States, anti-war demonstrators gathered at the White House in Washington, D.C. on Saturday to demand an end to the war in Ukraine and to all wars. The event takes place on the weekend marking the 20th anniversary of the U.S. invasion to Iraq. Protesters held signs reading "Peace in Ukraine, say no to endless U.S. wars," and fund people's needs, not the war machine. Demonstrators are also making connections between the human and financial toll of what they described as U.S. militarism at home and abroad. Likewise, organizations point out that the escalation of the conflict in Ukraine with the sending of $100 billion in military equipment clearly shows that the U.S. government does not care about the lives of Ukrainians and does not seek peace. Since 2003, the U.S. has engaged in the economic warfare in more than 40 countries such as Cuba, Zimbabwe, Venezuela, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Iran, and many other nations. Medea Benjamin, co-founder of the woman-led peace group Code Pink, said the message for President Biden was clear. It is time for negotiations to solve the problem and not fuel it.
Thank you, teleSUR, for covering this important rally when we're in front of the White House to tell President Biden that we don't want to keep fueling this war that's killing people every day in Ukraine, that we want him to be in favor of negotiations. And that's why we're here with a lot of spirit with this message, because it represents the message of the global South. We want to solve the problem, not fuel the war.
In France, protests continue against pension reform after passing on Friday without legislative vote. Elizabeth Borne, Prime Minister of the nation, announced the law approval, raising the minimum retirement age from 62 to 64, without the due approval of the country's parliament, and said that in this way, hours of debate will be avoided. These changes are necessary, or so say the authorities, following life expectancy increases in the European country. The strikes have spread to several cities in the country, leading to the arrest of over 60 people as part of the 270 demonstrations registered.
A requisition breaks the right to strike. Today, the people are in the streets to show their discontent. Macron, he does not listen to the little people. The people say no to him, and he continues despite everything, despite him having the majority even in the assembly. He imposes 49.3, so the requisitions, it will still set fire to power. We, the trade unionists, will be in the streets to defend our right to strike.
It is a question of solidarity. Personally, I'm not concerned, but it is a question of solidarity, and my wife is, and many other people are. And today it's retirement, but tomorrow it's going to be something else.
In addition to the demonstrations in France against the pension reform, Parisians took to the streets as well to protest against the supply of arms to Ukraine and to call for France's exit from NATO. Russian President Vladimir Putin arrived in Crimea to take part in the celebrations marking the 9th anniversary of the peninsula's reunification with Russia. Upon his arrival, the Russian president visited the historic and archaeological park of Khersoneso. The head of state also visited the Korsun Children's Center and an art school for children. During his tour, President Putin was accompanied by several authorities of the region, among them the governor of Sevastopol, Mikhail Razvozhaev. This Saturday, a number of celebrations commemorate the historical date, including photo exhibitions and concerts in the cities of the Crimea region. In 2014, following a referendum on the political status of Crimea, a reunification treaty was signed in Moscow on March 18th, which entered into force on March 21st of that same year. Sevastopol Governor Mikhail Razvozhaev commented on Crimea's reunification with Russia in 2014, saying it was the beginning of change in the Donbas region.
Those events that started in Sevastopol, they were a beginning, after which started the renewal of Donbass. All of this led to the events that we currently live through now. I am sure that they will end with our unconditional victory and with the triumph of the Russian world.
In Turkey, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan announced the extension of the agreement for grain and fertilizer exports through the Black Sea from Ukraine and Russia. At a ceremony held this Saturday in Kanakkale province, Erdogan thanked Moscow and Kiev as well as UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres for their efforts to extend the agreement that expired this Sunday, March 19th. The Turkish president stressed that this agreement, which has provided for the shipment of 25 million tons of grains to world markets with more than 800 ships to date, is of vital importance for the stability of the world food supply. According to Alexander Kubrakov, Ukraine's Minister of Infrastructure, the agreement is extended for another 120 days.
The Grain Corridor Agreement, which was the most important issue of reconciliation after the war, together with the prisoner exchanges of Russia and Ukraine, was ending as of today. As a result of our negotiation with both parties, we extend the agreement period, which will expire on March the 19th.
На нескольких языках, только с одной целью, чтобы их хотя бы сейчас услышали.
Clarified Moscow's position, statements by the parties to the grain agreement that the agreement had been extended for 120 days, reiterating that Russia had informed the respective governments, mediators, and agencies involved that the extension was for only 2 months, meaning a period of 60 days. Earlier in the day, Ukrainian Infrastructure Minister Alexander Kubrakov and Turkish broadcaster Haberturk reported that the grain deal had been extended for 120 days. However, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and UN Secretary General Stefan Dujarric's spokesman did not give an exact deadline. teleSUR English continues to grow. You can now tune in from 33 different African countries through StarSat. Dial 461 and enjoy our Latin American alternative broadcast. One final short break and we'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back from the files. Turkey's chief diplomat was in Cairo for talks with Egyptian officials as the regional power seeks to mend their frayed ties after years of tension. Speaking at a news conference with his Turkish counterpart, Egypt's foreign minister Sameh Shoukry called the relationship between the two nations brotherly, adding that he was pleased consultations had been launched to to restore normalization of relations between the two countries in all aspects. Egypt and Turkey have been at loggerheads since the Egyptian military's 2013 ouster of Islamist President Mohamed Morsi amid mass protests against his divisive 1 year of rule. Saturday's high-level visit was the first to Cairo by a Turkish chief diplomat since former Foreign Minister Ahmet Davutoglu's official visit to the Egyptian capital in 2012. Choguris and Cavusoglu met last month when the Egyptian Foreign Minister visited quake-hit Turkey and Syria to show solidarity with the two nations. On Saturday, Israelis gathered in towns and cities nationwide for an 11th straight week of protests against the judicial reform plans of the hard-right government of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Protesters fear that the proposed reforms, which are already moving through parliament and would increase the power of politicians over the courts, are a threat to Israeli democracy. In this context, they announced that the government initiative removes the Supreme Court's ability to review and annul unconstitutional laws, as well as allowing the executive full control over the appointment of judges. Demonstrators blocked roads as they set off on a march through the heart of the city. A court in Pakistan has cancelled arrest warrants for former Prime Minister Imran Khan in a corruption case, according to Khan's lawyer. Faisal Farid Chaudhry, part of Khan's legal team, expressed that the court in the capital Islamabad adjourned the session and instructed the former Prime Minister to ensure his presence at the next hearing on March 30th. The cancellation of the warrants came after Khan officially marked his appearance at the court. Khan's vehicle reached the gate of the court building on Saturday amid clashes between supporters of Khan's Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf party and police. Earlier on Saturday, police in Lahore carried out a raid at Khan's residence, breaking down the entrance gate to gain access. Khan condemned the raid and said it was carried out while his wife was alone at home. In Nigeria, citizens go back to the polls to vote in regional elections after February's contested presidential election. Nigerians elected 28 out of 36 state governors on Saturday as the opposition continues to reject President-elect Bola Tinubu's victory. Nigeria's Independent National Electoral Commission vowed to address challenges that arose in February's polls, including delays in voting and the uploading of results, which opposition parties said caused voter disenfranchisement and manipulation of results. National Security Advisor Babaganda Monguno reported on the deployment of the armed forces to secure the electoral process in the face of the tense security situation in the West African nation. We have come to the end of this news brief, and you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For Telesur English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.